Hello and a warm welcome to the Feed ZW. My name is Lynette Manzini. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. This program is brought to you every Tuesday between 12 and 1 p.m. So first of all, let me apologize for coming to you late, but better late than never. In today's program, we want to discuss the issue of Veld fires. So in October last month, 10 farm workers lost their lives while they were trying to put out a fire in Matabeleland South. We also heard a story recently of a child who died as well as a result of Veld fires. These are claiming lives and causing a lot of havoc. And this is the conversation we're having today. In today's program, I'm joined by the Firefight Trust founder, Wilson Chimwedzi. Welcome to the program, Wilson.
It's a pleasure to be here, Lynette.
It's a pleasure to have you in the studio. We've met elsewhere, yes, and it was a very refreshing seeing you once again. But we're meeting under such circumstances where people have lost their lives. Talk to us about Veld fires. What are these fires and what causes them?
I think firstly I'd like to say this year has been a tragic year. Mm-hmm. One life is too many. Mm-hmm. And so you don't want to be experiencing that. This year has been about 18 deaths due to fire. And fires continue to rage on. Even when it's raining, there are parts of this country that are still burning. So fire is a big challenge in Zimbabwe. But I want to give you perspective before we go into Zimbabwe. Did you know that Africa accounts for 61% of the world's wildfires? And of that 61%, Southern Africa accounts for 41% of that.
That's a lot.
So it's a shocker. It tells you, or it indicates that there's a relationship with fire that we have this side of the world. And why are we constantly burning every time? Fire is not a bad thing. It is the uncontrolled fires that lead to deaths, that lead to loss of property, that leads to human-wildlife conflicts, that leads to interpersonal misunderstandings, people fighting over who started the fire. Mm-hmm. It's a relationship that we have that we need to introspect and say why, and can we not curtail this challenge? Year on year in Zimbabwe, the numbers are growing. I've been talking statistics. Zimbabwe this year alone has been about 1.6 plus. I think our final figures will come through after the month of November is done. But 1.6 million, this is according to EMA statistics. That's a shocker. Whereas we are expecting, or we are hoping on our target for Zimbabwe is to gravitate around 500,000 hectares a year. So 1.6 million is a shocker by any standard.
So that's the amount of land that's been affected, destroyed by these fires.
Yes.
Whoa, that is a lot. And, looking at the issue of food insecurity, I'm actually trying to think how much could have contributed to food security. But before we get into that, you spoke about 61% of these fires emanating in Africa. Mm-hmm. And why is that so? Is it our weather? Is it because we've got too much vegetation? Why is it so?
Well, it's a combination of a lot of things, but also you look at, I think one of the main things is our culture. Mm-hmm. Remember, fire is a tool. We use fire, as Africans, we've been using fire as a tool for many things. Land clearing. We want to cook. We want to clear something. There's a snake somewhere. There's danger somewhere. We always use fire as a tool. Mm-hmm. So that culture continues on. It's a pastoralist kind of approach. From a long time back, we were nomads. We'd move from one place, burn, slash and burn. I think you've heard of that.
Yes.
We clear our land, grow our food. When we're done, After a couple of years, when the land is exhausted, we move on to another place. That's how we used to do it, and it's ingrained in our DNA, the use of fire. Take for example, right now, when you've got waste at home and the guys haven't come to pick up their waste, what's your first
I'll
instinct?
go to the dump site.
Your first
Fire, of
instinct is
course.
let me just burn that. So it's an intrinsic relationship that we have with fire, but we need to put sanity to the way we use it, and we need to be asking ourselves pertinent questions before we use it. Is the time right? What will it cause? How much of an impact will it be on our way of life? And you just mentioned the issue of food security. I think as we progress in the discussion, there are things that we also probably share in terms of food security.
Certainly. As you were discussing this, you're saying that fire is a tool. It's on its own, it's not a bad thing. You can actually use it for clearing, as you're saying. It's like driving a car. A car is not a bad thing, but if you are reckless as the driver, then there's a problem. So you are into raising awareness, your organization. How well has that been going? Because I think education takes center stage, because we cannot curtail this problem if people are not aware.
Okay, it hasn't been bad, but it's a tough space, changing mindsets. People are stuck in their ways. And the question is, why do you want us to stop using fire? Human beings are rational beings, you know what I mean?
Yes.
This year, I want to relate to some of the things that actually happened so that you really appreciate. Right now, Zimbabweans have lost a lot of their cows. Okay, that's draft power. Okay, due to the seasonal January disease. I think you've heard a lot of people saying they lost 4 or 5 cows and all that. Now, when you don't have draft power and you don't have disposable income, it makes business sense to clear your land using fire. It's logical, you see. So then who am I to go and say, don't be logical? You see what I mean? That's the biggest challenge around fire awareness. People are being logical because at the end of the day, they want to fill their stomachs. So they'll say, okay, I'll clear this land using fire. When the land is cleared, then I can grow my maize, and it makes sense.
Yes, it does.
But the challenge is when they do that, there are those runaway fires. There are some actions that people are not taking that then lead to these deaths that we are talking about. And it's not just land clearing. Of course, 45% of all the fires in Zimbabwe are caused by land clearing. Okay. And then, of course, we have artisanal mining. This is now a common thing. And even the issue that we're talking about in Matabeleland.
Maybe if you can just, before you move on to the Matabeleland issue, talk about the artisanal miners. How do they do that exactly? Okay. Because I'm thinking explosions underground, but
artisanal miners use detectors. Okay, the things are handheld detectors, but those handheld detectors cannot work very well if the land is not clear, so they burn. Then they come with them, and it makes life simple. So they're also driving that, and of course. Artisanal miners use fire for cooking. When they're out there, their number one tool is fire. So just to clear the place that they're working in, whatever they're doing, they're going to use fire. Again, simple logics that they're using. But that simple logic translates to runaway fires. So you see where the biggest challenge. So in your question, let me try and answer the question saying, we've been successful since we started in 2011, been successful in raising awareness and bringing the issue to light, to the point that even at COP 26 and 27, fire is now a big issue. Zimbabwe has been asked or tasked to say, give us the real numbers in terms of how much you're emissions, I'm sure you know,
yes,
as a result of these fires, so that we can build them in the final figure that we look at Zimbabwe, whether it's carbon sink or it's otherwise. Yeah.
So the Veld fires are also contributing to those carbon emissions and increasing our carbon footprint as a nation. So indeed, it's a very important issue for us to look into. Where do these Veld fires occur? Because I'm in the city here, and I'm thinking maybe it's in the rural areas.
Well, fires start everywhere. I know in the urban areas you always say it's a rural thing. But if you look right now, it's raining, and if you check out how people are growing maize in the byways and highways, the corners that you have people doing preparing some piece of land. Okay, at the end of the season, what are they going to do to the waste?
We have to close our windows because they're going to start a fire.
So you've noticed in the urban areas, there are a lot of fires that are occurring, also driven by waste burning. You know, sometimes they'll then go to that same little plot, put their waste there and burn it, and then you've got a fire going out. So we're seeing a lot of these fires happening in the urban areas and, of course, in the rural areas. But, of course, in terms of statistics, according to Emma, the highest hit areas are the resettled areas, the A1 areas, plots where you've got people there. And the explanation for that is simple. A1 farmers are not commercial farmers. They use either their cows, if they have them, and if they don't have cows, they're going to use the next best tool.
Fire.
You see.
So fire is, very prominent in those areas. So in case you're just joining us, you are tuned into the Feed ZW. My name is Lynette Manzini. Thank you very much for joining us. We are discussing this important issue to do with Veld fires. Remember, this is the Green Space brought to you every Tuesday, where we talk all things environment and climate change. Joining me here in the studio is the Firefight Trust founder, Wilson Chimwedzi. As I'm saying your name, it's like I'm going to forget it. But yes, it comes back. So, Wilson, you said that these fires are in the rural areas. Are they getting information? Because I'm thinking they might have lost property. They have seen people who've lost property, and also produce. Like the example in Matebelele and South, is the information being well received, or the logical aspect kicks in?
Well, I think it's the logical aspect that's kicking, because information is really going out. I mean, we've done a lot of programs over the last 10 years. And remember, this has been my bread and butter.
Yes.
And we've dealt with, in fact, we actually work with the Minister of Environment. We work with Emma. We work with Forestry Commission and Zimparks. And our engagements, continuous engagements, because as Firefight, we've got our focus areas are training, community training, where you bring in the community, we train them, and then we equip them. We also do integrated fire management, where we're looking at supervisors, managers, and trying to train them and understand about issues around fires within Zimbabwe. So I want to believe, and I'm honestly looking at it, information has gone out. It's now how we're going to use that information. One of the things that we also need to be wary of is the level of poverty in the country. While we cannot justify it, but it's also a driver of forest fires.
Yes.
Remember, when people are in tough times, they turn to the environment for survival. Okay, so people will go out there and hunt. Okay, for instance, hunt. You want to get meat, your rats, the mbeva. You want to be smoking, and all that. All those activities are fire related, and it's people trying to survive. You going into the environment. So you'll find that interaction, you can almost translate to say poverty equals to more fires. So it's important that we also look at those issues that drive fires. How can we assist people to start desisting and moving away from fires? But one of the things that I also want you to be aware of, and it's very important, our environment is fire adapted. Okay, when we say fire adapted, it means at some time or at some point, our savanna Moimbo environment must burn. Okay,
Must?
it must burn. Okay, to release or for ecosystem services balance. There are things that must be lost as a result of fire. Or, for instance, you have the seed bank where you have seeds that are in pods. When you burn, that pod is opened up, and the potash enriches the seed, and they have a sapling coming out. So it's important for that to be happening in process.
So it happens naturally.
It should happen naturally. Even when we say Veld fire, we're looking at the grasslands.
Okay.
So our grass must also burn, so that then next year we have good grass. So you've seen a lot of people practicing that in some places where there's a lot of thatched grass that they're using. People will normally just burn so that next year they have a good crop in terms of thatching grass.
So I've heard about Australian fires.
Okay.
And destroying vast tracts of land. But where do these fires just start on their own in Zimbabwe? Do we have such cases?
Or spontaneous fires. Yes, those are rare, but they do happen. Fires induced by lightning.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Here's the rationale about it. If you leave the environment to itself, like I said, it must burn. It is lightning that will bring fire.
Okay.
And then immediately after that lightning, there's rain. So it won't go far.
Okay.
You see what I mean? So it's actually very important that ecosystem services balance, where this happens and then this cools it off. But unfortunately, during the hot season, there's no rain to smolder a fire. You see what I mean? So it's important to be aware of that. And those are the challenges that we are now seeing as a result of that. Yeah.
And then also the issue of these persistent droughts caused by climate change. So how can the people in these areas guard against that?
Okay. In the various...
Because now I'm talking about spontaneous fires.
Okay. You're talking of spontaneous fires. Spontaneous fires, as far as we know in Zimbabwe, you will find them in the hot areas and in the parts where there are particular types of stone or rock.
Okay.
That can just generate a spark. Another thing that will cause spontaneous fires are like broken glasses that have been just strewn out all over, and that's another reason why we should make sure that our waste goes to the right place. So those spontaneous fires, we should guard against things like broken glass, just glass all over. But those are, I think we're looking at almost 1 to 2%. It's not that big. Well, let me put it this way. Fires in Zimbabwe are anthropogenic. They are human induced. So 95% of the fires are caused by human beings. So where your concern should be, generally would be,
what are we doing as human beings?
The 95% there. The 1% is maybe an ecoservice balance that's taking place. And while we must guard against it, it won't affect us as much.
So it only makes sense to focus on the 95%.
The 95, that is where the problem is.
So if you're talking about poverty, being Veld fires having a link with poverty, then I'm dreading to say that this is a challenge that may be with us for some time, because there are people who are struggling already, like you say, even in the urban areas. People want to get the rats, like you said, the wild animals, and end up starting these fires. How is government, in your view, playing a role to ensure that, I can't say eradicate poverty, but deal with poverty?
Well, of course, that's a government challenge to really change the issues around the economics and all that. And I think I'll put that to our professor Ntuli to deal with it. But in terms of dealing with how to resolve the fire issue, remember, fire is a science. Okay, there are 3 elements to fire. Okay, there's ignition, there is biomass, or
I'm not a scientist. Please don't expect me to give you the answer.
I thought you'd follow with me and then get there. And then you've got the oxygen. Okay, you've got the ignition, you've got the biomass, and then the oxygen. Those three factors are the factors that you deal with in stopping a fire.
Okay.
It's either you do away with the ignition, don't start a fire, and then the other two won't work. Then dealing with the oxygen, when there's air, how can you stop air? Then you're looking at the biomass, which is the fuel. Okay. So in terms of the work that's being done together with ourselves and AIM and other organizations, pre-season, biomass removal is very important. And that's what we call it biomass reduction, where we are saying, let's bale our grass and sell it. Remember, waste is money. A lot of people don't see the value of waste, but waste is money. That which you call waste is money.
Kutengesa marara,
Hey,
literally.
tengisa marara, manure esaya ngati tengise. Let's use them for conservation agriculture. You know, Fumvudza
Yes.
requires biomass, requires the grass, requires all that. Let's take it and keep it for the cows. I'm sure you've been in a rural place where you've seen a mashanga kaiswa somewhere there.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a form of biomass reduction.
But
So-
isn't that risky as well? If somebody were to ignite, start a fire close by with all those, that dry biomass in the yard.
It's risky, but the one thing that we always say, each household, this is part of our training, housekeeping is very important. Okay. You should know where you put your grass. You should know where you put your fire. You can put your grass here, and then immediately there you have that hole where you put your ashes from the kitchen. I mean, you're likely to
A
get a fire.
recipe for disaster.
So housekeeping is very important when it comes to fire. You must know that this is flammable material, so you should stay away from possible fires. Where you've got your pit, where you throw in your waste, it should be almost a distance enough so that a fire doesn't come up. So it's very important to look at how a household is. You can get to a house and say, okay, panaba pakarongeka, you know what I mean? And then you actually say, oh, there's a problem here. So those are the issues that we discuss with people. Say, this is very important. Let's keep our houses in order. Let's reduce biomass. We cannot control the air. And this is where the challenge then comes in with the issue of air. When you're looking at the three areas, air, the only way you can manage it is to understand its course during a particular season. And that's why we need to be checking. Remember the question I asked you, did you check the weather today?
And I said, yes. You can't be doing this to me while we're live on air. Yes, you actually highlighted that issue, that it's important to check weather patterns for us to understand where the wind is going. Let's go back to the issue of the 10 farm workers who passed away. You said before the program that they were trained firefighters.
Trained firefighters. The full report that we got, these guys knew what they were doing. I think one of the biggest challenges that they did in terms of their leader, when you're fighting a fire, it's important that the leader hangs back. The leader was literally involved in stopping the fire, which was not a bad thing. So when you have a fire, you need somebody to be equidistant from it, to be watching
from the outside,
everything, to say what is happening with the wind. Are those guys tired? They need water. How can we assist them? Do you need to send in another pair of hands to aid them? So and so is not doing so well. So unfortunately, while they were fighting the fire, the wind suddenly changed, and the open way that they had created became a fire funnel at that time. So they couldn't go back through that same route, and so they were actually engulfed by the. So the one who managed to survive with several burns actually braved it to go through a particular site where there was a fire, and he got burnt while I was getting out. So the others, unfortunately, because of that. So these are trained firefighters. Fire is well, a lot of people take fire for granted,
It's not child play,
It's not child play. I don't know how I explain this to people, but fire is not child
I think
play.
you need to explain it in the mother tongue so that it really gets to these people.
I can say this motor also sick now. I also sick now. I've seen so many times when we're going to fight a fire, people are too zealous. One of the things that happens when you're going to fight a fire, there are two types of people that you require to stop a fire. Maybe this is just extra information that kuna mkoma inonzi itai na mkomachi fungai. Okay, those are the two people that you find when it comes to fire. I'm referring to one must be the thinker,
Yes.
and the others are those who do what they're told. That's simple. That's firefighting. If you're going to have too many people who are going to rationalize and then think, they'll create a big challenge for the process of firefighting. So it's said that we lost 10 lives, but these were trained guys. One of the things that I also noticed from the report was they were equipped, but not adequately equipped. And then the other thing was they were not in the proper regalia, because some of them were wearing gumboots. I think if you saw the pictures that came out, gumboot and fire was purely plastic.
So what we're saying is when a fire starts and you want to fight that fire, first, instead of going to put out the fire, you need to think about yourself first. What are you wearing?
Safety first. Safety first. Before, when you hear of a fire, you must assemble, okay, and establish your working protocol first.
But how practical is this? Because you have tracts of land with produce and it's on fire and you're the farm manager and you have a boss to answer to. How practical is it?
It's very practical when people continuously do fire drills.
Okay.
When they train, when they're constantly talking about it. In fact, the best way of stopping a fire is avoiding a fire. So when we constantly talk about a fire, train around a fire, we are literally avoiding a fire. Okay. So when we do have a fire, as much as we are losing a lot of food, we can't afford to lose a life.
Certainly.
Yeah. I know the bosses who make sure it stops, but I think it would be unfair for them to be putting somebody in arm's length with death if safety is not taken as a precaution. So it's very important that people look at all those elements before they start a fire. They looking at the health. Do we have a proper team? How are we going to do it? Remember, a fire can suddenly change. So if you want to save a particular area, you'd rather go and do a backburn, but that's a specialized type of approach. So it's very important to go through the drills. It's one thing to say, but it's another thing to know how to stop a fire. And safety is the first precaution that everyone should take. One of the things that we are not also doing in Zimbabwe is not doing enough fire guards. You have a plot, you've got wheat, you've got that. But around that wheat, there is no fire guard.
Maybe they think you're wasting space.
You see, that's the challenge that you actually find. But people always think that it doesn't matter. But it does matter when there's a fire.
Exactly.
So it's important to take all the necessary precautions beforehand. And so this is the drive that we're pushing. Reduction of biomass, fire guards. A fire guard, we need to put as many fire guards as we can to avoid fires moving from one point to another. If you've got a crop on X plot of your farm, you must have a fire guard between the next crop or whichever fields that you have. It's important, and they should maintain a minimum of 9 meters. 9 meters, because fires do fly. And do you know why they fly? Because of wind. I'm sure you've seen mashanga, the maize stalks.
Yes.
They easily catch a fire, and they can actually be carried by the wind.
We are running out of time, but I'd like you to talk about how climate change is exacerbating veld fires in Zimbabwe.
Climate change and veld fires, it's a chicken and egg situation. Okay?
What came first?
When you burn, okay, we emit, causing greenhouse gas houses and the effect.
Yes.
But when it's hot, it induces a fire. So when temperatures go up, we always have a lot of fires because it's very dry. The curing, we call this curing. When it's dry, start a fire, spontaneous, will run away. So climate change is being driven by veld fires, but also climate change is causing veld fires. Literally, because climate change is the temperatures have gone up, and because of the fires, we have emissions. One of the biggest emitters in Africa of carbon dioxide is veld fires. So you can see how much of a big issue it is. And we need to fight fires and reduce the amount of emissions. I'm sure your next question most probably would, how do we do it? The question is very difficult when there is no money that supports stopping fires. There's no direct income that can come from stopping fires. Our government, our companies must put money towards veld fires. It's something that's part of our lives. It's a risk that we must curtail. So the more money we put into it, the better results we will get. Fund activities of fire guards, fund activities of reducing biomass, the baling. And the good thing about the baling is...
But with the fire guards, is Emma not spearheading that?
They are. I think that's also a misnomer that we need to correct. It's not Emma's function to stop a fire.
It's our function.
It's not Emma's function, and everyone keeps saying it's Emma's function. No, Emma's job is to tell us, go and stop fires. But
then it's up to us after getting the knowledge.
Yeah.
What are we doing with the knowledge? That's the $1 million question.
The $1 million question. I think I'll give you 3 things that we need to do as Zimbabwe, maybe before we close. In Zimbabwe, we need to put money into fire. Number 2, we need to equip ourselves. A lot of people, when there's a fire, you see running with the branches, breaking the trees, the very trees that we want to protect.
The very trees that can absorb the carbon.
You see what I'm saying? So those are the challenges. So we put that. And of course, another thing that I think we should do as a country is to have district fire stations. Throughout the 63 districts, we do not have land-based fire stations. So that's a bit concerning.
So are we talking about fire brigade here?
Yeah, fire brigade, but fire brigade that focuses on veld fires. That's why you find in Australia, no matter how far the fires will go, they can respond to those fires and curtail them. And in those cases, you find that in Australia, you find that 1 or 2 people died. Did you know that in Zimbabwe is number 1, in terms of ranking, Zimbabwe is number 3 in the world due to world fire deaths by fire.
Those are bad statistics.
Deaths by fire. So that's bad for us. We need such systems to start curtailing. And the sooner we have that, that's why I'm saying we need money to put into fire so that rural district councils have fire stations. They have tenders, people responding, people well trained. And the program of training must be an ongoing training program. And I'm also passionate about schools. We need to start training our kids. Our kids have positive influence. I'm sure you've seen it. You've got a child and you're not wearing a seatbelt. They'll tell you,
they're calling the shots.
And you're like, okay, sorry. Yeah, they have influence. Let's train them so that they can influence parents, influence themselves and the parents. And I guess those are some of the interventions that we can do to alleviate and reduce the amount of fires in Zimbabwe.
On that note, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today.
No, it's a pleasure. Hey.
The pleasure is mine for hosting you. So there you have it, viewers. That was the Firefight Trust founder, Wilson Chimwedzi. He was here in the studio with us explaining what veld fires are, their causes. And, from his presentation, it shows that human beings cause 95% of these veld fires. So with the information you have gained today, the information you have gained through other organizations, it's up to you, it's up to me as an individual to ensure that I am playing my part. Lives have been lost. it has affected our food security, and we're losing a lot of biodiversity. So it is up to you. So thank you very much for tuning in to this program. Don't forget to tune in next week, Tuesday at 12 p.m. My name is Lynette Manzini. Goodbye.